Welcome back. You're watching African Perspective. We're talking about reforms at the AU. Vincent Karega is the High Commissioner of Rwanda to South Africa. Dr. David Monyae is an international relations political expert at the University of Johannesburg. We're talking about various aspects of reform, but now let's talk about the economies of Africa. The African Free Trade Agreement, that was something that's been mooted for a while. Finally, there was been some headway. Let's start with you, Dr. Monyae. But there's still some reservations. What are they, and why are we still trying to eke out this long dreamt of goal?
I think what we have seen happening is that there's been a lot of discussions, quite a lot of achievements. However, Nigeria hasn't signed. I mean, it is to do with internal issues, trade union. When South Africa took time to sign, and I think what we see are major problems that we confront. It's only 12% of our trade which is among ourselves as Africans, and the bulk of the trade is the external world. Key issues and factors are that we produce more or less similar raw material. And there isn't much beneficiation and way of ensuring that we maximize on products that we have. For instance, platinum. Just South Africa and Zimbabwe, control the bulk, more than 50% of global platinum. And if the two countries could unite and around that and have a way of producing finished goods out of the products that we produce, will have an influence in terms of the price, global price on platinum. At the moment, all these prices are determined by people in Washington and London. So we still have a long way. However, a good start. We need to push much more harder to ensure that 1.1 billion Africans have weight in terms of our negotiation, whether with the Chinese, Americans, or Europeans.
High Commissioner, is the AU still bedeviled by strong regional blocs, and I'm talking East, West, South, that are failing to come together as a united bloc? I mean, you see trade much stronger in those blocs, whether it's East or West, but as the African Union, it's still a bit of a struggle.
I wish those blocks were also strong so that we could have at least a reference point, because much as they are trying, there are still a lot of room for improvement on non-tariff barriers, on infrastructure issues, on paper processing, on the corruption issue that you one time talked about. So there's a lot we can do, and there's a lot of information sharing. In some cases, people don't even know what is processed or produced in their neighborhood, and it is imported automatically from the former colonial power. We have cases in Africa where food is imported from Europe, fresh veg, fresh meat, yet SADC also exports meat and veg and fruit to Europe, and they fly over Africa. So we can trade more within the continent if information, simplification of procedures, and ease movement of people and goods is facilitated.
But High Commissioner, what are the tactile moves that we are hatching in terms of strategically going to those multilateral bodies like the G20 and saying, as a unit, as the AU, we are saying this is what we want? As you say, we need a better, stronger voice to argue better for ourselves.
It's not about arguing. It's about first, have we the voice? So we are building the voice. Once we have the voice, definitely the content to argue with will be there. So reforms is about building our voice, building our content, building consensus, building ownership at continental level. Then we can move strongly. But if that does not exist, then we may end up negotiating as former friends from a bilateral, or definitely a small bloc. Maybe SADC negotiating their own issues, and East Africa doing their own issues, or within East Africa too, talking better to each other than the SICs and so on. So now we need to be a strong AU, and everybody understand that. And I believe when we get internal economic interest and we become serious about our organization, even the sanctions within will make sense. But if inside there's not much to lose, even the sanction, even the pressure on individual country become quite less. So let's
Commissioner
build
is absolutely right, Dr. Monyae,
the
because
voice, the systems that will make us look like one and talk like one and understand our content before we start arguing with others.
The EPA is a typical example where African countries have been ripped apart because they're looking out for their own individual interests. So how does, beyond representativity, and I'm talking about tactile moves, how does the AU do that?
I think there's a need of unity with a purpose around key issues, with also an understanding that the world we're living in today, it is that all these institutions that we're talking about, IMF, World Bank, WTO, some of them won't exist in the next 2-3 years. There's so much disintegration with the United States going on its own way, European Union is disintegrating, and you have China on one hand rising, and Japan, and we have to realize we have no one else to defend us other than ourselves. Okay. And therefore that unity among Africans and ensure that we can do with or without some of these partners.
Having said that, just as a final question, High Commissioner, is the African Union worried that Europe seems to be becoming more right or going more right in its politics?
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
Is the African Union concerned that Europe is going more right with its politics?
I think Africa should be much more concerned about Africa first. Then once we are better positioned, we will know how to deal with ourselves and how to deal with whoever. And dynamics in the world are changing. Probably the Europe of yesterday is not the Europe of tomorrow. And I don't think the Europe of yesterday served a bigger purpose for Africa. It was trade imbalance that we are talking about, the bad platinum trade, the bad petroleum. If we go to the cocoa, to the coffee, to the tea, to the meat, there's nothing like Pan-African petrol, Pan-African cocoa, Pan-African platinum that we need to build and then know exactly who to talk to.
It seems like very quickly, Dr. Monyae,
Indeed, High Commissioner, I would like to engage you much more head on in terms of some of our countries are the ones who are producing youth unemployment, and most of our youth are dying in the Mediterranean, and the AU is not saying anything, and that in itself, it's a shame on the continent that we still have young people dying, trying to run away from their continent. Now, the bigger question is that why our youth running away from their continent?
Definitely there are problems in the continent. Nobody will say Africa is perfect, but it cannot be overcome overnight. There are wars here and there. There are poverty, there are bad governance. There are also issues that are legacy of bad colonial politics. Also, as I said, Africa has got a lot of problems, but not all problems in Africa are internal.
And there is corruption.
But we have to work on our problems. If we work on our problems boldly, if we have self-criticism and self-reform system, that's why we must support reform. And that's why we must realize we don't have enough time to think that we can consult forever.
High Commissioner, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Sure. And there is the issue of corruption, as you said, which is something the AU is discussing currently in Botswana at a high-level delegation there. And that there is the High Commissioner of Rwanda to South Africa, Vincent Karega, as well as Dr. David Monyae, an international relations political analyst at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you to you both so much for joining us. We'll be back after